to look inward and master the soul, to look inside and master the heart, to look deep and master the arts. The Kingdom of Nri was one of those civilizations that cared more about its citizens than almost any other located in West Africa. It cared more about sophistication and living a beautiful lifestyle than it did about colonizing and even starting wars with outsiders. Located in Igbo land, though there have been some migrations that occurred prior, they have the same history as almost any other in Nigeria. We can go through it. So we have the 3000 BC iron, and then the 2000 BC introduction of new metals, the discovery of gold later, and then they create their own techniques. The way that they created this was bending the metals. This is on par with just about anything across the world. It is easy for anyone to notice that it has multiple layers to it and multiple stories being told around the entire thing. Now, this Igbo type art is a standout even for West African art, which, by the way, they were masters of several things in especially in Nigeria. I mean, some of the gold that you see there is ridiculous in make and creation. Some of it sometimes, I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought I'm looking at something that was made in Rome or in China, but it was actually made in West Africa. But to look at this structure and be able to, I don't even know, to be able to tell that it's got multiple parts from back then, what is the motivation? What made them go this far to create this structure? Which, by the way, when the Europeans first got there, they thought it must have been some kind of person from an exceptional land who landed in these areas, or it got here through trade. Which, speaking of trade, these people were excellent at that too. They, again, like a lot of West African kingdoms or West African civilizations, traded with people from Egypt, people from Sudan, the Berbers, even though the Berbers had not made it this far in time. These people, in other words, were the ones moving from this area, probably giving it to Canem, and then Canem transporting it back and forth. This piece is probably my favorite because it still goes back, even though they're perfectly capable of creating human faces, as you saw in the other one at the top, it had a human face looking the other way. They still go back to the geometric patterns that probably symbolize something deep in their history. Now, if we get back at the art later, what type of lifestyle do these people live? Well, it's hard to get a lot of information, but from the information that I could gather, they were egalitarian. They did not have the typical West African lifestyle at the time where slavery was a thing. So in this region, there's two things, right? I don't know if it's 100% fact, but a thing that I read was that even slaves that came from foreign lands, when they entered this civilization, would be considered free men. Now, I don't know how seriously that would have been taken when, you know, when the other empires come in saying, where is this person that entered your kingdom? The people who lived in this region clearly believed in harmony over war. They believed in taking care of each other, and they believed in art. And in fact, I would say that they were masters of art. Of course, these people are connected from further places, and I recognize that style with the dots all over it. That looks a bit like Benin bronzes, but what would you expect? These people probably came from a similar culture, except these guys excelled. I mean, if you know anything about creating with these types of materials, this is not easy to create. You notice how it's very well done, and you would probably, this is where the West falls off in terms of predictions, because in its history, the West has reasons why certain places in the world have art that grows in a specific way. But when it comes to this specific culture, it's almost completely independent how they have these types of. This part is so confusing. Is that a shell? Okay, so if we move on to the scarification, very typical of Africa. Now, some people don't understand that the scarification was not very small. I mean, these scarification methods, by the way, look at the hat that he's got on. These scarification methods that were used in Africa, you can see here, could be pretty excessive. I mean, some of these you would call like disfiguring to the point of being unrecognizable. I mean, this is how someone would hide their face if they didn't want anyone to be able to see him ever again. And, at the time it was considered a beauty standard, but, kind of glad it's gone because, yeah, it looks fairly painful. And from the last image I showed you, it's easy to assume that it is realistic the way that it is. Now, it does kind of have a look of, non-African type. I don't mean it doesn't look African, but if someone took it and just put it out there without telling you where it's from, it kind of has an Aztec look about it, the art. Now, obviously, the Aztec had no influence on these people whatsoever, but it's actually interesting because it does look very Aztec. Am I the only one who sees it? These people, if you said this was the same person, I could believe that a little bit without obviously the scars being removed. Now, again, unnecessarily detailed. If you look at the holes in the head or the little holes sticking out of the, I assume, crown, but they didn't stop at just portraying images that were just visualized. By the way, the reason why this is probably impressive to me is you don't typically get this level of work in Africa for pure artistic reasons. And I believe that there's no way you can explain the ones that we saw earlier without saying it's just purely for art. Maybe it's to portray something, but that's still art. And if you notice, a lot of them in Africa, a lot of art in Africa is carryable. In other words, it's some kind of totem, it's some kind of item, it's some kind of thing that you move around with. Now, I'm not saying those ones were used for that, but clearly there is a obsession with just the way that it looks like. Now, I don't even know what this is. I don't know if it's a spring. I don't know what it is, but it looks like it would be pretty fascinating. It might be an omelet. This one is from the 1500s, and it was definitely put on the arm. And again, twisted metal, very good, very, very, very high culture. Now, obviously, this culture is related to all the other cultures, as you will see. in the blankets. The only thing that I have not talked about yet in West Africa, I've focused a lot on the metals, is whether or not the cotton is independent from North Africa or West Africa or even other parts of Africa like Sudan. And the answer will probably come in another video, but a lot of people still to this day, even scholars from West Africa, still believe that a lot of the techniques that came from cotton and other fibers is something that came from outside of Africa. Interestingly, this was not the common belief of both the Arabs, the Berbers, and the Europeans. So that's not both, that's three, but and the early Europeans. They saw similarities between this culture in the way that they create and the culture of the ancient Egyptians, saying that their sewing techniques or their threading techniques were more similar to each other than any other culture, which again might show that these people were creating, by the way, these people were creating other things by putting them together in a threaded way, like mats, papyrus. So it's not as if they had no skill whatsoever. For any kingdom, the most important thing in the world is what? The people. Without the people, you do not have a population, you do not have a kingdom. It doesn't matter how powerful or whatever the king is, he cannot exist completely on his own. And these people were very important, and this king or these people understood the importance of that. Now, let's read one myth, but we'll make a longer video on this because I first need to gather a lot more information because I forgot a lot about the civilization, I'll be honest. I need to gather a lot more information and then we can make a full video. Now, there's two things to keep in handy, I guess. Um, these people, mainly their history is oral history. It's not like Kanem, and it's not like Kanu, and it's not like the people, the Wangara. So they didn't really write until a certain date, and they had the unfortunate thing of being taken over and losing a lot of their history, even the oral history that was consistent because of peace times fell out because of war times. So this is a I mean it wouldn't be written in English, but this is a typical religious myth. There was famine. Ezenri called on Chuku for food. Chuku said, "Offer your first son and first daughter." They were made Ichi marks. They were offered to Chuku. After 12 days, on the grave of the son grew yam and palm oil. On the grave of the daughter grew cocoyam and maize and vegetables. Chuku said, "Distribute all these to all Igbo and receive tribute from them." Now, if you're wondering who Ezenri is, that is a title for a king. And as you will see on Wikipedia, we can show the king's list. Almost all of them have this title. Eze is the typical Igbo name for king or ruler, and Nri is the kingdom. So Ezenri is the kingdom, or Ezenri is the title of the king. Although this video won't be that detailed, we will see that there is clearly a lot of information available out there. So we have Ezenri, Ifekawanim, Ezenri Namakwe, Ezenri Bofe, Ezenri Omalo. and so forth and so on. So it's not like there isn't a wealth of information, but a lot of it is wrapped up in mythology, which is a important thing to say.